How is this dude still alive?
He is not a dude. You're a dude. This is a man. A handsome, muscular man.
Hi folks, I'm Ignatiy Vishnevetsky.
And I'm Alex Dowd.
Today we're talking about Marvel's big crossover blockbuster, Avengers Infinity War.
Welcome to Film Club.
What we've got here is a kind of a comic style crossover event.
Yes. That were sort of, if you've been reading comics since the early 90s, there were these events that basically crossed over a number of different books. So that if you were a comic reader, you had to shell out an enormous amount of money to get the whole story. You know, you had to buy Spider-Man and the Avengers and X-Men to get the full story.
Well, good news, because this time you only have to buy
a single movie ticket.
A single movie ticket to be incredibly confused.
That's right.
So I think we're a little bit split on this.
Okay.
Because I think that some of the virtues of this film outweigh some of its flaws, namely its breathless pacing.
Yeah.
I think that you're of the opposite opinion here.
I think the breathless pacing is a good and a bad thing. I mean, I like that this thing just keeps moving, that there's not a lot of fat on its bones, but there can't be, is the thing. There is absolutely no way that this film could possibly have superfluous stuff in it because there are so many characters. I mean, since Nick Fury showed up in the end credits of Iron Man, they've been building this idea that this is a shared universe, you know, that these characters can appear in each other's films, that we're sort of building a mega franchise made up of components from the various solo franchises. This one takes that to a new extreme, in the sense that I do think this is a movie that would be fairly confusing to you if you had not seen maybe 17 of the 18 movies. You could get away with not seeing Ant-Man because he is not in this film. But otherwise, the whole thing is built on an understanding that you know who these characters are, which I find admirable in some respects. I mean, there's not a lot of throat clearing. We don't need to be reintroduced to Peter Parker or anything. I do sort of like that it basically starts, it just starts immediately. We meet Thanos and this thing is off, you know, off to the races. But I do think that this is a situation where you have so many characters that you basically spend the whole movie people just trying to elbow their way into scenes, you know?
Right. But let's just say that it's incredibly overstuffed, and that you have Thanos, a villain who's been teased in end credits stingers for a long time at this point. Arriving, he wants the Infinity Stones, they're MacGuffins, they go in a gauntlet, he's going to destroy half the universe. That's basically everything you need to know, besides the backstories and relationships that these characters have established over several years of films.
Well, and it assumes that you have that already, and I get that. I mean, a movie like this, most of the people going to see this film probably have seen a number of these movies. But why do we go to these movies and why do we enjoy them? I personally like the Marvel movies, but I like them mostly because they're showcases for these personalities. Now, you could argue that Infinity War, by pushing them all together, is sort of doing what these movies do best. Some of the more beloved and better liked ones, like the Avengers, are all about collisions of personalities. But this is a film that has so much plot to get through and that has to move these. I honestly felt like game pieces being moved around a board a lot of the time. I do think that the film ends on a very strong note. I don't know how much more I can say about that without getting into the dreaded spoiler territory you were discussing earlier. I think this thing has the courage of its convictions in a lot of ways. It sort of dares to go downbeat in a way that I think even fans who have been speculating about where this movie might go, I think they're going to be taken aback. I think there's going to be some upset people in the audience. We'll put it that way.
That having been said, I do wish that those downbeat qualities kind of arrived earlier.
Yeah.
Because for a long stretch of the film, it's kind of juggling, and it's a lot of quips and zinging from one place to another, and characters colliding without really lingering in the moment of what's going on.
Do you think Thanos works as a villain? Because I get what they're trying to do with him. You know, essentially, you look at a character like Thanos, and he's very silly, both in appearance and just, I mean, he's this universe conqueror, and his grand plan. I mean, the plot of this movie is basically just Thanos wants to kill half the universe.
Yeah.
That is the plot of the film. And I think that they try, somewhat with Brolin's performance, but also just with how they characterize him in this film, to make him a kind of tragic figure. He's someone who has decided that literally killing half the universe is the best solution to overpopulation, which is an interesting idea. I think particularly the proximity to Black Panther, where we had a truly complex and interesting and even sympathetic villain, does not do Thanos any favors.
There is a conflict that the film establishes, I think, that's very interesting, that I think it underexplores, but it does give it a certain, gives all of this weightless action a certain dramatic heft, and that is the difference between Thanos' righteousness and basically all of our established Marvel heroes. Because I think that this is a film, and again, you really have to kind of dance around spoilers here, that is ultimately about the Marvel heroes and their inability to make tough decisions. That's kind of what comes across as their great flaw. It's like you have these two extremes. You have our shiny, heroes that we've known for all of these films, but they don't want to see, they want this best possible outcome. And then you have this completely vicious pragmatist in the form of Thanos. That's an interesting conflict that I wish the film did more with. There's just too much to do. There's always something that they have to do. There's something that they have to get. You're cutting between 3 or 4 different narrative threads, and I think in the Marvel style, even though it's evolved into this more comic book-like, more colorful form in the last few years, and you see that in something like Black Panther or in the visual style of Thor Ragnarok. You see that in the elaborate special effects here, because this often feels like one of the more effects-driven films. Even though they all contain tons of special effects, I think very few of them, like with the exception of Doctor Strange, you would really think of as a film that's driven by the effects. But here it's just constant light shows.
Well, they're not great, honestly.
I thought
you liked the effects? Okay.
I thought the effects were okay. I think this idea of a light show is sometimes used pejoratively, but I enjoy the chaos of this film's climax and all the different lightning bolts and weird creatures swirling around. But what you don't get is downtime, which I think is where this style really flourishes.
Yeah, and I mean, they got the right people for the job, theoretically, I mean, it's the writing and directing teams, the Russo brothers and the regular screenwriters they've worked with on the 2 Captain America movies, the second 2 Captain America movies, which I think are among the strongest of the Marvel films, partially because they're very graceful, I think, about the multitasking, about sort of moving from these elaborate action scenes to giving every character their own sort of due. I think they're defeated by this thing, though. I think they're defeated by the demands of it and by the sheer volume of characters that they have to balance.
But also, I think a certain air of inevitability. I think this film kind of aspires to be, well, for lack of a better term, to be the Empire Strikes Back of the MCU. But whereas that film, I think, represents everything that its series does well at its best, this one doesn't.
Perfectly balanced. As all things should be. I hope they remember you.